Charles Bukowski was an alcoholic, a womanizer, a chronic gambler. He spent 30 years getting rejected by every publisher who saw his work. He filed letters at a post office for a salary that left him broke. He gambled away what little he had at the racetrack. He drank alone at night and sometimes passed out on the floor. And then, at age 50, a small publisher took a chance on him. Bukowski wrote his first novel in 3 weeks. He went on to publish 6 novels and hundreds of poems. Over 2 million copies sold. He became the thing everyone said he would never be. So when you hear that story, what's the lesson? Never give up. Believe in yourself. Persist against all odds. Right? Well, here is what's written on Charles Bukowski's tombstone. 2 words. Don't try. That epitaph is the entire premise of one of the most counterintuitive, most uncomfortable, and most genuinely useful self-help books ever written. A book that will tell you directly, without apology, that the way you've been thinking about success, happiness, and what a good life looks like is probably backwards. The book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F**k by Mark Manson. And I promise you, it is not what the title suggests.
Let's get the most common misunderstanding out of the way first. Not giving a F does not mean being indifferent to everything. It does not mean being a couch potato. It does not mean telling your boss off and moving to Bali. A person who genuinely doesn't care about anything is called a psychopath. That's not what Manson is selling. Here's what he's actually saying. We live in a world that is constantly telling us to care more. Care about your career, your image, your body, your reputation, your follower count, the opinions of people you went to high school with, whether the restaurant you're at is as good as the restaurant your co-workers went to. We are bombarded all day, every day, with messages designed to make us give a F about an infinite number of things. And most of those things don't matter. The problem isn't that we don't care enough, it's that we care too much about too many things, leaving nothing left over for the things that actually matter. There's a saying in Texas, the smallest dog barks the loudest. A confident man doesn't need to prove he's confident. A wealthy woman doesn't need to convince anyone she's wealthy. If you're constantly pursuing happiness and posting about it and performing it, chances are you don't actually have it. Because here's the backwards law that runs through everything Manson writes and that he borrows from the philosopher Alan Watts. Wanting positive experience is itself a negative experience. Accepting negative experience is itself a positive experience. The more you desperately want to be happy, the less happy you feel. The more you try to be liked, the more anxious about being liked you become. The more urgently you pursue success, the more inadequate you feel. The pursuit of the thing reinforces the absence of the thing. And the only way out is to stop making everything about feeling good all the time and start making it about choosing what actually matters to you. That's what not giving a F means. Not caring about nothing, caring about the right things, deliberately, consciously, because you chose them. Manson is direct about what this book is, a guide to suffering better. Not a guide to avoiding suffering, to doing it better, more meaningfully, with more self-awareness. And that, counterintuitively, is the path to a genuinely good life.
Part 2. The Feedback Loop from Hell. Before we get into Manson's framework, he identifies something that is making modern life measurably worse for millions of people. He calls it the feedback loop from hell. Here's how it works. You get anxious about something, normal, human, expected. But then, because you live in a world where everyone on social media appears to be having the time of their life at all times, you become anxious about the fact that you're anxious. You feel like something is wrong with you for feeling this way. Now you're anxious about being anxious, which makes you more anxious, which makes you feel worse about being anxious, which makes the anxiety worse, round and round endlessly, until what started as a normal human emotion has become a spiral of self-loathing that feels impossible to escape. The same thing happens with anger, with guilt, with sadness. Manson's solution is brilliantly simple. Not giving an F that you feel bad. Not fighting the feeling, not performing happiness over it, not telling yourself you shouldn't feel this way. Just acknowledging it with complete indifference to the fact that it exists. I feel like garbage today. Who cares? Back to work. When you stop making negative emotions into a problem on top of the original problem, the feedback loop collapses. The feeling is still there, but it's no longer a sign that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It's just a Tuesday. Part 3. Choose your struggle. Manson asks the most important question in the book early, and most self-help books never ask it at all. He says, "What do you want out of life?" And everyone gives the same useless answer. To be happy, to be successful, to have a great relationship, to be healthy and financially secure. Everybody wants that. That answer tells you nothing. The real question, the one that separates who you actually are from who you imagine yourself to be, is this. What pain are you willing to sustain? Manson tells us about his own rock star fantasy. For most of his adolescence and young adulthood, he imagined himself on stage, the crowd going insane, playing guitar to screaming thousands. He had it all planned. He was just waiting for the right moment to commit. First, he'd finish school, then he'd save some money, then he'd find the right band, then nothing. He never became a rock star, not even close, and it took him years to figure out why. He was in love with the result, not the process. He loved imagining himself on stage. He did not love the 6 hours of daily practice, the broken strings, the hauling 40 pounds of gear to an empty bar at 11 p.m., the years of rejection before a single good show. The dream was beautiful. The work required to achieve it, he didn't actually want that. And this, Manson says, is the difference between what you want and what you actually want. Between the people who get fit and the people who don't isn't willpower or desire. It's whether they genuinely enjoy or at minimum accept the discomfort of training. Between the person who builds a successful business and the person who just talks about building a business isn't talent or vision. It's whether they can live with the anxiety of uncertainty, the 60-hour weeks, the public failures, the persistent chance that it won't work. Between the person who has a great relationship and the person who keeps saying they want one is whether they're willing to do the hard work of actual intimacy, the difficult conversations, the vulnerability, the moments when love requires you to be uncomfortable. Who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for, not what you enjoy, what you're willing to suffer. Because everything worth having comes with suffering attached. The only question is whether you've chosen the right suffering. Part 4. The Self-Awareness Onion. Manson introduces one of the most practically useful frameworks in the book, the Self-Awareness Onion. He says self-awareness has 3 layers, and most people never make it past the first one. Layer 1, understanding your emotions. This is the surface level, knowing what you feel. Right now, I'm angry. I'm feeling anxious about this. Sounds simple. Many people are actually terrible at even this. Manson admits he's one of them. He describes his wife asking him what's wrong, him insisting nothing's wrong, and 30 minutes later exploding about something he had clearly been feeling the whole time. We have emotional blind spots, and those blind spots prevent us from understanding ourselves. Layer 2, understanding why you feel what you feel. This is harder. Why are you angry? What does that anger represent? Is it because you failed at something? Because you feel disrespected? Because something violated a value you hold? Getting to this layer requires asking yourself uncomfortable questions and sitting with the answers rather than deflecting. Layer 3, understanding your values. This is the deepest layer and where genuine change happens. Why do you consider this a failure? By what standard are you measuring yourself? What does success or failure actually mean to you? And is that measurement, that metric, actually a good one? Manson gives the example of Dave Mustaine. In 1983, Mustaine was kicked out of his band just before they recorded their first album. No explanation, no warning. They literally woke him up one morning and handed him a bus ticket home. Consumed by rage and humiliation, Mustaine made a vow. He would form a new band so successful that his old band would spend the rest of their lives regretting it. He'd become so famous that they'd see his face everywhere forever. He worked like a man possessed. He built Megadeth from nothing into one of the most influential heavy metal bands in history. 25 million albums sold, worldwide tours, stadium crowds. By any reasonable measure, an extraordinary success. Except in a rare interview in 2003, a tearful Mustaine admitted he still considered himself a failure, because the band he'd been kicked out of was Metallica, and Metallica had sold 180 million albums. Mustaine, despite building something genuinely extraordinary, had chosen a metric, be more successful than Metallica, that made him a failure by definition. The same event, the same career, the same talent, but a completely different experience of it, based entirely on the standard he'd chosen to measure himself by. Now contrast that with Pete Best. Pete Best was the original drummer of the Beatles before Ringo. He got fired right before Beatlemania exploded, right before John, Paul, and George became 4 of the most famous human beings on the planet. He fell into depression. His career stalled. His life fell apart. And yet, in an interview in 1994, Best said, "I'm happier than I would have been with the Beatles, because being fired led him to meet his wife, and his wife led him to a family, and his family became his metric. By that measurement, he had everything he wanted. Same circumstances, different values, different life experience." This is what Manson means when he says that changing your life isn't about achieving more, it's about choosing better metrics, better things to measure yourself by.
Part 5. Responsibility and fault. One of the most practically important ideas in the book is a distinction that most people have never clearly articulated, even though it affects every major decision they make. The difference between fault and responsibility. Manson tells the story of William James, Born wealthy, but constantly ill, failing at everything he tried, rejected by his family as the black sheep, while his brother became a celebrated novelist, James dropped out of medical school, traveled to the Amazon, contracted smallpox, and was left alone in the jungle, unable to walk, nearly 30 years old, having failed at everything. He made plans to end his life. But before he did, he came across a philosopher's lectures and decided to conduct an experiment. For 1 year, he would take complete responsibility for everything in his life, not blame, not fault, just responsibility. He would act as though everything that happened to him was his to manage. If nothing improved, he would end things. William James went on to become the father of American psychology, a Harvard professor, the author of work translated into dozens of languages, and the husband of a woman he deeply loved. He later called that experiment his rebirth. Here's the distinction Manson draws. Fault looks backward. It assigns blame for what already happened. Responsibility looks forward. It asks, given what's happening, what am I going to do? You can be a victim, genuinely, legitimately wronged by something or someone, and still be responsible for your response. Malala Yousafzai was shot in the face at 14 by the Taliban for advocating girls' education. She was not at fault. She was absolutely, entirely, completely responsible for what happened next. And what happened next was that she became a Nobel Prize winner who changed the global conversation about girls' access to education. The shooting was not her fault. Her response was her responsibility. Manson applies this to relationships, to childhood trauma, to genetic disadvantage, to every form of suffering. Not, this is your fault, but this is yours to work with. And that distinction, subtle as it sounds, is the difference between a life spent blaming the world and a life spent building something in spite of it. Part 6. You're wrong about everything. Manson has a chapter called You're Wrong About Everything, but so am I, and I want to spend time here because it's one of the most practically freeing ideas in the book. He says, our brains are magnificent and deeply flawed meaning-making machines. We take random events and construct narratives about them. We see patterns where there are none. We remember the past inaccurately. We predict the future incorrectly. We carry beliefs formed in childhood into adulthood without questioning them. We are wrong, constantly, about almost everything. And here's the good news. That's fine. The goal isn't to be right. The goal is to be slightly less wrong over time. Growth is iterative. We go from wrong to slightly less wrong, and slightly less wrong to slightly less wrong than that forever. And that process is what a good life looks like. The problem isn't being wrong. The problem is being certain. Manson describes what he calls Manson's law of avoidance. The more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. The person who secretly fears they have no talent will avoid submitting the work because the answer would be definitive. The person who secretly fears they're not lovable will avoid asking someone out because the rejection would confirm the fear. The person who has built their identity around being a certain kind of person will avoid any experience that challenges that identity, even if the experience might transform them for the better. We hold on to being wrong because the certainty of our current wrongness is more comfortable than the uncertainty of possibly being right in a different way. His prescription is counterintuitive, but liberating. Don't try to find yourself. Don't try to know yourself. Because that self you find and know will become a cage, a fixed identity you'll spend enormous energy defending instead of something fluid and growing. Stay uncertain. Stay curious. Stay willing to be wrong. That openness is not weakness. It is the only engine of genuine growth. Part 7. Do something. One of the most practically actionable ideas in the entire book is from Manson's high school maths teacher, Mr. Packwood. When a student was stuck on a problem, Mr. Packwood would say, "Don't sit there and think about it, just start working on it." Even if you don't know what you're doing, the act of working on it will eventually cause the right ideas to show up in your head. Manson turned this into what he calls the do something principle. Most of us believe that motivation works like this. You feel inspired, which motivates you, which causes you to act. Emotional inspiration, motivation, action. And when you don't feel inspired, you can't act, so you wait for the inspiration, which doesn't come, so nothing changes. What Manson discovered, working on his own blog, building his own business from scratch, sleeping on friends' couches, and eating ramen because he had no money, is that the order is actually wrong. Action doesn't follow motivation. Action creates motivation. Action, inspiration, motivation, more action, more inspiration. The act of doing something, however small, generates the emotional energy to keep doing something, and that energy generates more action. 200 crappy words a day. That's the writing advice of a novelist who wrote over 70 books. Not write when inspired. 200 words every day. Even terrible ones, even pointless ones, because the act of writing creates the inspiration to write better. You don't need to feel ready. You need to begin. And beginning anything, the smallest possible version of beginning, starts the loop that eventually builds into whatever you want to build. Action is always within reach, even when nothing else is. Part 8. The importance of saying no. In 2009, Mark Manson sold most of his possessions, left his apartment, and spent the next 5 years traveling through 55 countries. He had girlfriends in different cities who were quickly replaced by the next flight to the next country. He had friends everywhere and deep relationships nowhere. He had extraordinary experiences and almost nothing that lasted. And then he moved to New York, married a woman named Fernanda, bought furniture, got an electric bill, and settled. And he learned something he had spent 5 years avoiding. Absolute freedom by itself means nothing. Freedom is valuable because it creates the possibility of choosing what matters. But freedom without choice, without commitment, without the willingness to say no to everything that isn't what you actually want, that's not freedom. That's just running from one distraction to the next. Manson says the key insight is this: you are defined not by what you choose, but by what you are willing to reject. To value X, you must reject non-X. To commit to one person means rejecting every other person. To commit to one craft means rejecting the 1,000 hours you could spend on other crafts. To commit to one place means rejecting everywhere else. And this rejection isn't loss, it's identity. It's the thing that makes you specifically you, rather than a diffuse cloud of unlimited potential that amounts to nothing. He discovered in Russia, of all places, that there is a particular kind of freedom that comes not from unlimited options, but from honest communication. Russians tell you exactly what they think, all the time, without softening it for your feelings. At first it was shocking, then it was refreshing, then it was one of the most liberating things he'd ever experienced. Because you always knew where you stood. There was no performance, no management of impressions, just honest exchange between two people.
saying no to people, to relationships, to opportunities, to the version of your life you imagined but don't actually want, is not failure. It is how you build a life that is actually yours.
Part 9. And then you die. The final chapter of the book is the most important one, and it's the one Manson uses to tie everything together. When Manson was 19, he went to a party on a lake outside Dallas with his best friend, Josh. Late in the evening, they got separated. Manson went inside with a girl to get food. Josh walked down to the cliff above the lake. When Manson came out, the pool was empty. People were running toward the water, and there were sirens. It took scuba divers 3 hours to find Josh's body. His legs had cramped from dehydration and the impact of the jump. It was dark. No one could see where his cries for help were coming from. Manson had had no idea Josh was a terrible swimmer. He writes about the grief and about a dream he had of Josh several months later, in which Josh asked him, "Why do you care that I'm dead when you're still so afraid to live?" That question changed everything. Manson then introduces the work of Ernest Becker, a professor who was fired for 4 academic jobs in 6 years, got colon cancer, and spent his final years writing a book about death that won the Pulitzer Prize. Becker's argument was simple and devastating. We are the only animals who can conceptualize our own death. We know, consciously or not, that we will die. And this knowledge creates what he called death terror, a deep underlying anxiety that drives most of what we do. To cope with that terror, we build what Becker called immortality projects, something that will outlast our physical death, a legacy, a name, a family, a piece of art, a business, a religion, a political movement. Everything humans have ever built, Becker argues, is an attempt to create something that will survive after we do. And when those projects fail, when the meaning collapses, when the legacy disappears, when the thing we built turns to dust, the death terror rushes back in. Manson's conclusion from all of this is counterintuitive but freeing. The only way to live is to confront mortality directly, to hold it in mind deliberately, to ask yourself regularly, what is my legacy? What will I leave? What will be different because I was here? Not because the answer is obvious, it rarely is, but because the question burns away everything that doesn't matter. He writes about sitting on the edge of a cliff in South Africa, literally sitting with his legs over the edge, staring down at the water below, forcing himself to remain present with the reality of his own death. And he says that in those moments, something clarifies. The noise quiets, the trivial falls away, the things he'd been spending his fucks on, the petty grievances, the status games, the desperate need for approval, all of it shrinks to nothing in the face of the one fact that cannot be argued with. You are going to die. Everyone you know is going to die. And in that space, in the space opened up by that truth, what remains are the things worth actually giving a fuck about.
Here's what "don't try" actually means. It doesn't mean give up. It doesn't mean stop caring. It means stop performing. Stop trying to convince everyone, including yourself, that you have it figured out. Stop pursuing the feeling of happiness instead of actually doing the things that create it. Stop trying to appear confident and just make the decisions a confident person would make. Stop trying to look successful and just do the work success requires. Stop trying to feel loved and just be the person worth loving.
The trying is what's getting in the way. Because here's what Bukowski understood. He was a failure, a drunk, a mess. He knew it. He accepted it completely. He wrote about it honestly. And in that acceptance, in that refusal to perform a version of himself he wasn't, he produced something real enough to outlast him. That's the subtle art. Not caring less about everything, caring deeply about the right things, the things you've actually chosen after honest examination over the things you've been told to want, and then committing to those things completely, including all the struggle and discomfort and failure that comes along with them. The book is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, published 2016, over 13 million copies sold. It is funnier than any book in this category has any right to be. It is more honest than most, and it will leave you with questions that are worth sitting with for a long time. Leave me a comment with the one thing you've been giving too many fucks about that doesn't actually deserve them. I want to know. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next one.